You win Super Bowl after Super Bowl, but then it all comes crashing down. Your star quarterback leaves you. Your coach leaves you. You miss on the next quarterback that you draft. You miss on your next head coach. Surely the Browns would make a Super Bowl before that team rebounds and makes another one, right? But we are the Cleveland Browns, so that is not the case. The Patriots are back in the Super Bowl playing the Seahawks in a rematch of that Super Bowl from years past. Hopefully, they run it this time instead of passing. Noah, the Browns are still nowhere near sniffing a Super Bowl, and you have to start to wonder if process plays a part of that.
Yeah, you do have to wonder if process plays a part of that. And let us know in the comments if you think process is part of the problem here in Cleveland. Don't forget to subscribe and like as well. We are back on a beautiful Monday. Well, I don't know if beautiful is the word you want to use here with the snowstorm, the snowpocalypse, everything that this snowstorm has been touted is going on. Hope everyone out there is warm and safe. But process came into question as the weekend started to hit for the Cleveland Browns and their process of how they're going about to find their head coaching candidate. And we're running it a little different than most, Erik.
That we are. Honestly, the things that I'm hearing, and we're going to talk about here in a minute, I am embarrassed to be a Cleveland Browns fan. And there's like no other way of saying it. Because once again, we think we're the smartest people in the room by doing a completely upended and different process than every other team that's hiring a head coach right now.
Yeah, we are. Let's just play the clip from Tom Pelissero on the Rich Eisen show because it paints the picture, and then we can sit down and really react to what he was saying.
The Browns search process and interview process, which they have run a number of times, is unlike any other in the NFL. And it plays to certain types of candidates. They are a data driven operation in Cleveland. And so they spend an extraordinary amount of time gathering data on their coaching candidates. You're talking about taking a personality test. You're talking about writing an essay. You're talking about completing homework assignments going into both the first and the second rounds of interviews. It plays toward the types of candidates that they have in the mix, which is very, very smart people in a lot of cases that just often happen to be tall, thin guys who came from Ivy League schools, so that's certainly not a requirement. That's the type of candidate generally that is going to fit into a data-driven environment.
Erik, thoughts, man?
First of all, if I have to hear data driven combined with the Cleveland Browns one more time, I'm going to rip what little hair I have left out because it is so frustrating that these guys think that they can do things just completely different and that it's going to result in a net positive. So far, it's resulted in negative every single time. So stop trying to outthink the room. I'm just so frustrated. I don't have words, and that's rare for me, as you know, because I'm so frustrated.
So I take a little bit of a different stance with this. And while I understand and I agree on the majority of what you're saying, Erik, and I think you're completely just in your mindset, because when I heard this report when it first came out, that's exactly where I was too. But where I'm at with this is also understanding what the Cleveland Browns are looking for and what the Cleveland Browns are trying to do with this head coaching search. We sat down on our show and talked about, we wanted a well-rounded, maybe a retread type of candidate, someone who has experience being a head coach at the NFL. Well, the Browns said that's not what they want to do. They want to go get the next big thing. They're going to try to take a swing on the next big thing, whether that be Shielhaus, whether that be Udinsky. Those are the names that are like the most important, the most popular, the most smoke and mirrors being around, right? So to me, having a longer vetted out process for guys that maybe aren't the hot names this year, but could be the hot names in the next 2 to 3 years makes sense. But at the same time, I can't also sit on our show after going through all of the talk about being so far done with this analytic mindset and then be like, well, I understand why they're going the analytic way. It's frustrating. It is frustrating for sure.
Does it make sense? Because I, for one, looking at this process, don't feel like we're any closer to being a winning team, to putting a winning team together. And maybe we will hit on the next great coach. But you're telling me that we didn't want anything to do with John Harbaugh? or any of these other guys. How about the fact that guys are turning us down? I think Mike McDaniel was high on the Browns list and he withdrew, supposedly to take an OC job, but that's not the case because he's now interviewing for head coaching positions again. That's what's being impacted here. We can't attract talent, and that's a very scary possibility if that's going to continue into the future that we can't attract talent. Um, I don't know. It worries me how the direction of this team and where we're going certainly worries me.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid criticism. And I think Rich Eisen kind of shares the same sentiment with you. I'm going to continue that clip for 1 second just to let it run because I think it backs what you're saying. And I think it backs what most Cleveland Browns fans out there are feeling right now.
There's a
Kandinsky is
written
there.
test. There's a written test, huh? Really? Like they want you to
There's
write an essay. This is why I want to be the coach of the Cleveland Browns, or
questionnaires, a multi-part essay,
yeah.
a
I mean,
personality test, and then additional homework assignments if you get through the first round to get into the second round. Which
and
you
the
can
answer,
imagine then.
the answer can't be Google me. Like you can't go Signetti. I know I'm being flippant, Tom, but that to me, I don't know. You're hopping around the country, interviewing for jobs, kids, spouses, boxes
You
being
could
packed because
imagine.
you've hit the road and you're going to sit down and write an essay. You know,
You
like
could imagine then when certain candidates decide not to follow
yeah,
through on interviews, part of it may be that it's more than just show up in a nice suit and answer questions in the room.
Erik?
Yeah, I mean, I'm agreeing here with what's being said. I don't know. We've been the joke of the league, and it seems like we continue to be the joke of the league. Again, if you look at the 31 other teams and you go, nah, we're going to do it better. Something's wrong in that equation. We've seen it with on field talent evaluation. We've seen it in draft evaluation. Andrew Berry did hit on this last draft, but let's not pretend like he's had a bunch of good drafts in a row and that we've capitalized on talent here. So, again, you're looking around the room and you're going, no, I have it figured out better than everybody else for the past 60 years. I have a different way that's going to result in, if the proof were in the pudding, if we were consistently in the playoffs and winning Super Bowls, then I would agree. I would say, great job. You changed the way that things are done in the NFL. But so far, that has not done anything for us. So as we go down the road and as we think about trying, we're talking about a guy, by the way, that would come in and get paid like 5, 6, 7 million dollars a year. And we have people pulling out. Think about that. Think about the craziness of that. We have assistant coaches who will, 6x their salary at least, and they're saying, nah, that's okay. Like, thank you anyway.
Well, the people that are pulling out, though, aren't assistant coaches. It's Mike McDaniel, who was a head coach beforehand. It's Jesse Minter, who was all but already signing the dotted line for the Baltimore Ravens. And as much as I want to shit on the Baltimore Ravens and not lean in their favor, that job
Shula,
opening is
you missed
Shula.
Shula.
Well, Shula hasn't signed anywhere. Shula backed out because he thought he was getting
Exactly. That's my
Pittsburgh. But
point.
Shula backed out because he thought he was getting Pittsburgh, and look at where that went. Let me play
You
a little
don't.
devil's ad- Let me play a
No, I
little devil's
disagree.
advocate. Let me play a little devil's advocate with you for a second, Erik. You go in for a job interview. There's a vetting process, right? Maybe you have to take a personality test. I sure have, even in lower income, like I'm talking like my high school jobs, like at Burger King. You've had to take some of these exams and that kind of thing. Why is that so strange when we're talking about bringing in a young coordinator, especially an offensive coordinator, not even a coordinator, pass game specialist when you're talking about Chilhas, who just got eliminated from the playoffs? Why is this vetting process such a big deal is my thought process.
I'll answer that question very succinctly for you. I've also been hired for jobs where I took a personality test, etc. And when I finish some of those personality tests, sometimes I get to the end and I go, I completely agree, that's my personality. Other times I get to the end of it and I go, that's way off. You can't look at something like that, that feels like such a waste of time, by the way, and evaluate somebody. You evaluate a person by having conversations with them. You talk through and I'm sure they're doing this too, but you talk through very significant scenarios. You talk through their schemes, what they envision, their leadership quality, et cetera, et cetera. Like there's a long
Right.
list. I'm sure the Browns are doing exactly that as well. But to now add on a level that just feels like a time waster, and it's felt that, I'm sure when you've done it, it felt that way too,
Fair.
especially some of the former head coaches where there's a body of work. Go look. If you want to talk about scheme, you can watch the 60 some games that he coached and understand his scheme. So, like, to impose that on these guys, to give them homework assignments, I get where you're coming from. Like, looking at it from a complete net neutral way and saying, hey, this is a guy that's going to get paid millions of dollars. They can do a little work to get that.
Yes.
Um, but when you're talking about coaches that have existed in this league for a long time, that have coached in this league, maybe that makes sense for some of these young guys. Maybe it doesn't, but for some of these other guys, the process seems, it seems like they're just not doing it the right way.
And I agree with you 100%. If we were targeting a John Harbaugh, if we were targeting a Sean McDermott, if we were targeting
Why aren't we?
because that's not the route that they wanted to take. The route that they wanted to take was trying to get the next young upstart. They're trying to swing for the Sean McVay. And well, we can have another 10, 15, 20, 30-minute conversation about
No,
that thought process, but that's what they're
this,
trying to do with
but
Shieldhouse. That's what they're trying to
go,
do with
I know, go a
UDFC.
step further. Use your analytical skills now and go a step further. Why do they want a young coach?
Why do they want a young coach? To keep him long term. And they also,
No.
the main problem with the Cleveland Browns and the main problem with what has transpired the last couple of years is the offense. So bringing in a young offensive mind with fresh ideas fixes that. And I know where you're going to go with this. You're going to say so they can control him, right?
Bingo. Read between the lines. They want a guy. John Harbaugh is going to come in and it's going to be his way and he's going to make final decisions. They do not want that. They want that all to flow downhill like it's been flowing. Jimmy D, how's that working out for you?
Hey, and maybe that's the thought process, but you look at what the Cleveland Browns have done, and yes, I've given them criticism for everything that has gone on the last couple of years, specifically since the Deshaun Watson trade. I think anyone who talks Cleveland sports, whether you be big, small, or in between, have given them plenty of their criticism and just criticism for what's happened with this team and with this franchise since the Deshaun Watson trade. But the biggest issue with the Cleveland Browns in 2025 and 2024 was what? The offense, which is why they are going after some of these younger, newer, upstart names to come in here and bring fresh ideas to an offense, whether that
Sure,
be with
but
a
that's not going to
quarterback like
fix
Shador
this
Sanders.
roster.
What do you mean? That's part of it too, but
That's a big chunk of it.
it is a big chunk of it, Eric. But after what we saw last year, we're putting faith, whether, again, that's the right decision or not, we're putting faith into Andrew Berry to go out there and fix this roster. And he did a good job in the draft, and he did a good job at times in free agency in years past. I don't know how highly you want to rank the 2025 free agency class, but he's done things before to fix this roster. If we put all our resources in offense, maybe it does get fixed. Maybe a young mind upstarts us and pushes us in a right direction. That's the thought process they're having. Now, it's a completely different conversation if that's the right thought process, but that's the conversation we're having right now.
I'll believe it when I see it. And I was a proponent of getting Kevin Stefanski out of here,
So was
but
I.
I also wouldn't be surprised if he goes and finds success in Atlanta. So if he goes and makes the playoffs next year, then
But
how
Eric
dumb do
is
we look?
But Eric, is that just the Cleveland Browns fan in you that everything always blows up in your face and you're upset by it? Or do you actually see his negatives for what they are? Negatives, the player personnel side that we've talked about at length on this show.
I've been preaching it
This
far before you jumped on that bandwagon, first of all.
100%. I
So
will give
yes,
you credit.
I do see those things. My point though is that we have systemic failure and it starts at the top. More and
Yeah.
more, and I've defended Andrew Berry this whole time, but more and more, and he needs to prove it to me in a 1 year time span. But
Yes, he
more and
does.
more, I'm on the side of they should have just cleaned house, period. Got rid of
Yeah,
everybody. But who
probably.
knows? You'd probably have GM saying, nah, I don't really want to take that interview. No, thank you.
So, do you think that this vetting process that they're going through with the personality tests, the essays, everything is a detriment to our head coaching search? Do you think that's actually a reason why a Mike McDaniel, for example, or even a John Harbaugh, who never really took a real interview with us, are turning down our jobs? Or do you think that's just a prerequisite that is kind of happening because we're looking at these younger names?
I think when you have commentators saying they're doing it different than every other team hiring a coach, I don't think that's a good thing. That's my point. Listen, I hope that I'm wrong. I hope this turns out well. Um, is Mike McDaniel like who cancels when you say, "Oh, he thought he was getting the Pittsburgh job." That's not why he canceled the interview. There was no offer. You continue interviewing of like you know this about finding a job yourself. You would continue interviewing and you'd be lucky to find a head coaching position in the one of like 7 available or whatever it was. That wasn't the case because, yeah, if there were an offer on the table, you pull out. So clearly they weren't at that stage. Clearly they weren't even having those talks because he wasn't hired in Pittsburgh. So to say that that's the case, it's just not. It's our process. People don't want to come coach here, and I think that's a terrible thing.
So let me play this. You're talking about Chris Shula right now and him backing out. Chris Shula was never a name that I was super high on anyway, so I don't care. Same
Me
thing with
either,
Mike
but that's not the
McDaniel.
point. But go on.
Same thing with what's his name that went to
Jesse
Baltimore. I forget.
Minter.
Jesse Minter. Thank you. Um, to me, you look at these people that are backing out, right? Mike McDaniel, who took the job with the Chargers, right? He also was supposed to interview with the Bills once that job opened up and canceled that one as well. And that is a team with
That's
a
odd
lot of
too.
play. Yeah, right. So to me, does it really matter if there's a public? And I criticize them for Mike McDaniel coming out and canceling our interview and then taking another job and having these like public spouts of people saying no to us and then taking other jobs. But does it really matter when they're also turning down the other franchises they're talking to? I mean, Mike McDaniel turned down the Ravens too. And the Ravens job is attractive. We've talked about how it's attractive with Clay when we brought him on to talk about John Harbaugh and his fit here. I mean, there's different reasons for any of this.
Maybe you're right.
Mike
But
McDaniel's
again,
best choice was to go be a coordinator, and we both agreed on that. Aside from the Browns
well,
implications,
I didn't really agree there. Maybe you're right though. But again, when you have people saying, "Hey, the Browns are doing it differently than every other team," that doesn't strike me as a positive. Does it you? I mean, do you think, "Wow, yeah, we know what we're doing"?
Yes and no. I don't think conformity always means success. If you think about conformity, you think about we went through the vibes process that most teams go through and ended up hiring Hugh Jackson. We went through this process and hired Kevin Stefanski. And while it didn't work out long term, it did get us a playoff berth. It did get him 2 Coach of the Year awards, whether those are overrated or
Yeah.
not. And that's another conversation 100%. And I'm open to that conversation now more than I ever was in years past, and you know that. But to me, the over focus on this process just has to do with the franchise representation or franchise trying to think of the word here. The franchise, the opinion that everyone has of the Cleveland Browns right now. Whereas if, say, the Steelers or say Green Bay went through a process like that, oh, they're being innovative. They're trying something different and it might get them success. If it was someone else, it would be a different thought process. It would be a different perspective.
Maybe you're right. But those teams have Super Bowl rings.
True.
So they get a little bit of latitude. We don't.
True.
Like that's
True.
just the reality of the situation. When you have a franchise ownership and GM that has not proven themselves,
True.
not one bit. Two
True.
playoff appearances and one playoff win does not mean shit. So when
Valid.
you have that, then the rest of it doesn't matter. Being innovative and putting yourself out there, like, yeah, I want our team to be innovative. But when I hear that we're the most data-driven organization in the NFL, that does not strike me as a positive at all. That
No.
same data analytics that tell us to go for it at the 40, when we turn the ball, like that has not worked out for us. So I'm not saying conform for the sake of conformity. I'm saying that maybe 31 other NFL teams almost all of which have hoisted a Lombardi trophy, might know what they're doing in hiring.
No, and I think you have a very valid thought process there. And you know how I feel about analytics. At the end of the day, I am a football guy. Like, I played football. I have played plenty of football where I'm on the side of numbers don't matter as much as the eye test. We've talked about it with Shador Sanders. We've talked about it with coaching. We've talked about it through ample things through all the time that we've done this show. So I agree with you on that. But I do want to say, at the same time, I want to give them a little bit of credit here that I don't think overanalyzing, especially when you're talking about wanting to bring in a young guy, an upstart, an offensive guru, or a genius that Shielhaas or Udinsky may or may not be, but that's what we're trying to swing for. Doing this kind of stuff, having this type of vetting process, to me, isn't the end of the world. Now, if we were only focusing on Mike McCarthy, Sean McDermott, John Harbaugh, those were the three names we were interviewing, and we were making John Harbaugh sit down on a Friday afternoon and write a 3-page essay on coming in and why he wants to be the coach of the Cleveland Browns, I would laugh at them 100%. But while that might be your and I's thought process of how they should have went about that, that's not theirs. And I agree with the thought process and the vetting process for how they're going about and who they want to bring in as the next head coach of our team, the Cleveland Browns.
I feel like they've had a lot of conversations with Harbaugh before he ultimately chose the Giants. And I wonder, was this job not attractive enough for him? And thus he went with the Giants. Like, if he felt like he could have been in a really good place in Cleveland, I think he'd be here.
But I don't know if I think this job would have been attractive aside from like any of the weird vetting processes that we had. Like, you look at the Giants, they have, of course, Scattaboo and Dart and pieces on the defense and Malik Neighbors, and you can see a direction where that team could be good very quick. Well, will that happen? Who knows? It's the
And they
Giants.
won
They've
less
been
games than us this past year. I mean, I'm
100%.
not sure that's a good argument. Listen, we could talk in circles about this all day, but there is something else that I want to touch on, and that is the Rooney Rule. We've talked about it a little bit, but there is news on that front.
Yeah, we have officially scratched the itch of the Rooney Rule. The Browns have brought in Anthony Lynn, who is a former Chargers head coach. He's now the running backs coach for the Detroit Lions. For a head coaching interview, obviously he scratches the itch of the Rooney Rule. And saying scratches the itch of the Rooney Rule feels so wrong, but that's the kind of conversation we've had to have at this point because of Mike McDaniel dropping out and then Shielhaas being the only minority candidate. But we are going to be, as of today's video, Rooney Rule compliant because we are flying to LA to meet with Shielhaas, which means we've now interviewed 2 minority head coaches. So that means I'm expecting maybe tomorrow's video, the next day, us talking about the head coaching candidate that Cleveland Browns have signed, whether that be Udinsky or Shielhaas.
Yeah, he's actually the Commanders running backs coach. He was the offensive coordinator for Detroit at one point, though. My question, we've talked about this, like, it's very clear that this interview was to hit the Rooney Rule, though. How do you feel about that?
Oh, I don't love it. And me and you were talking about it over the weekend off screen about how maybe they just take the fine and, in a way, even though it's not living up to the Rooney Rule, upholding the Rooney Rule in a right way because they're not just bringing in someone to interview for the sake of interviewing like they did here. So to me, I don't love it, but I also get why you do it because you have to do it. It's one of those things where it's hard because you want the Rooney Rule to work, but does it really make sense in practice sometimes when you have situations like this where you have 2 guys you were decently high on to be your head coaching candidate come in and then one back out, so now you have to do something to live up to the Rooney Rule? I don't know how you fix it. I'm not one of those guys that can come up with an answer for this type of situation. I don't feel like I'm qualified to be the guy to come up with the answer to this situation. I don't love it, but at least we know we can move forward for sure, and we're not going to have to worry about some random hiccup now. What do you feel about it?
The only thing I'll say is that the part of the Rooney Rule that certainly needs to change is if you do hire a minority coach, because we talked about this, if we were to hire Shielhaas, you still need to satisfy the Rooney Rule and interview 2 minorities. That makes zero sense to me. Like, you're hitting the purpose of it is to get more minority coaches in the NFL. So if you're going to hire that, I don't know. I think that we've talked about it. The intent of it is great. The execution is pretty poor.
Bingo.
But it is, as you're saying, it is good to note that the Browns now aren't hamstrung and could move on with a hire if they like Haas, if they like Udinski, one of those guys. It seems like it's going to be one of those guys,
Yes.
in my opinion, right?
Yeah, I
Like
think that's
Schwartz has fallen
the
off a bit.
I think that's the outward opinion, unless Udinski ends up with Buffalo, and it seemed like his interview ran pretty short, so he wasn't really going to be hired there. And I don't think Shieldhaas is going anywhere because all of the places he was rumored to have coaching interviews at, he might have a Raiders interview actually. But regardless, it seems like it's one of those two names, and they're going to make a decision early this week, and by the weekend. So this comes out on Monday. So by Friday, I think we will know who the new head coach of the Cleveland Browns is, and it could be as soon as today. This video comes out at 10 a.m., but it could, with the interview being in LA, it could be later today that they end up hiring Shieldhaas or Udinski, and then we have a presser to react to, which will be exciting for sure.
Which is very exciting. Speaking of organizational chaos, I do want to touch real quick. I know we're a Browns channel, but did you catch Terry Pagula's interview? That's the owner of the
Bills.
wow, thank you, Bills. I don't know why that just blanked out of my head, but
No,
the
you're
owner of the
good.
Bills. Did you catch any of that?
Yes, that was absolutely hilarious. And it's funny how adding a franchise player like Josh Allen can just make you forget how dysfunctional your organization is sometimes. We thought we were on the up and up with Baker and that whole core. And obviously, we're back to the same old Cleveland Browns. And after that interview, I feel like Bills fans have to feel just a little bit like they're back to the Bills before Josh Allen came onto the scene, even though I think they'll bounce back pretty quick because Josh Allen is that guy.
Which is funny too, because they went to 3 Super Bowls in the '90s, so it's not like they've been a slouch of a team. But yeah, watching that, I felt a little better about our situation.
Erik, real quick before we get out of here, I want to hear your take just in general because this video will definitely come out before the Browns hire a head coach. Do you think they're leaning Shieldhaas, Udinski? Who do you want? Who do you think they'll hire?
I think they'll hire Shieldhaas. Something in my gut tells me that. I kind of prefer Udinski from what I've heard. But either way, I'm fairly happy, honestly, with either one.
Yeah, I think both of them follow the thought process that they're trying to go for here. I like that it scratches the itch of trying to fix the offense. The offense was the problem. It seems like probably either way they go with either of these names, Jim Schwartz will come back as the DC, which is totally fine. I think that's great. I think if somehow both names fall down, that's how you end up with Jim Schwartz as your head coach. I lean Shieldhaas because he does have more experience in football, not pro, but in football. He was going to end up being a head coach in the college ranks, jumped to go learn under Sean McVay, who wouldn't when you can attach your name to the coaching tree of Sean McVay. So he's an interesting one for me. I like that there's a little bit more experience, a little bit more age there too. Udinski,
Mm.
though, is exciting. I enjoy the stories, the sleeping in his car, listening him nerd out about football, but I do think it'll be either one of these two names. I lean Shieldhaas both ways because it feels like we've been waiting for him for so long that they're going to end up going that way. But maybe the interview today doesn't go well and they end up landing on Udinski because from all accounts, both interviews went extremely well for the kid.
The only thing I don't like about Shieldhaas is that he doesn't have like Udinski's an actual offensive coordinator in the
True.
NFL, and Shieldhaas has never been. So experience, I disagree a little bit with your take there, but again, I would be happy with either candidate at this point.
And neither of them are play callers. Don't get that twisted either. Neither of them have called plays in the NFL. Not that I think that matters so much when you're talking about the CEO head coach role, but it does make me question, are they going to be the type of head coach to come in here and want to call plays, which I don't love that decision in general, not just talking about Stefanski's tenure, but in general, I like a head coach who is a head coach who lets his OC be the OC. You know what I mean?
How about Udinski head coach Shieldhaas OC?
Flip it. Flip it, actually. I'd rather it be Shieldhaas with a little bit more age, give Udinski. I don't know. I don't think it makes sense because if Udinski has like 1 or 2 good years, he'll be out of here and we will need a new OC anyway. So you got to pick one of the names. One of them will probably be a play caller. And hopefully our next video or the video after that will be us reacting to the Browns finally hiring a head coach.
And on that note, the debate never ends, but the show does for now. We'll see you next time.